What is up, Ravens Flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. James and Glenn are the best in the business. They're killing it right now. They love talking Raven talk. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin, and we are here to talk about your Baltimore Ravens, of course, and really to address the question that Glenn and I started asking ourselves after John Harbaugh's presser following the Steelers game and throughout this week, and that really is John Harbaugh finally done with Greg Roman? Is he finally off the Greg Roman ship? So we're here to talk about it, give you some thoughts, give you some quotes, pontificate a bit. But before we dig into it, take a second, hit the subscribe button, so that way you can stay with all your Ravens news. Of course, turn on your notifications and hit the like button if you're enjoying the content, and always leave your comments below. But Glenn, talk to me about kind of what sparked this idea, or this, not idea, but this feeling, right? That maybe John has kind of turned the corner in the wrong direction for Greg Roman's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Ravens offense has obviously been under a lot of scrutiny over these last 6 weeks since Lamar Jackson went down, and really even before that, as the offense, that was really riding high when the season opened, had Lamar as the favorite of the MVP for the first few weeks, and then we've just seen the nosedive effect happen to this offense. And every time we hear Greg Roman and we hear John Harbaugh, they just reemphasize the commitment. They kind of reemphasize the fact that they believe they have the right guys in the room to get this ship righted and to get it back on the right track. John Harbaugh said, talked about their countless hours of working all in the same direction, how they're unified and all this and that. But in the last presser, it just seemed like some of that kind of defensive armor that he puts up for his guys and his coaching staff. And I mean, rightfully so. I mean, you're the head coach. You don't want to throw your guys under the bus, players, coaches. No, it really doesn't play. It rarely benefits your team to throw players or coaches under the bus. Typically, you just say, we lose as a team, we win as a team, and ultimately buck stops with me. But this time, it's like he had no defense for some of the questions. I mean, the biggest one that jumped out to me was the fact that Gus Edwards played 9 snaps, Jimbo.
3 carries.
He had 3 carries after. I mean, really, we were starting to see the ramp-up effect for Gus and starting to see him wear down on defenses, especially in the second half.
That was your first question, Glenn, right after the game.
Yeah, where was Gus? And when asked that, John Harbaugh said, I wasn't happy about that. In all honesty, Gus should have played more. There's really no excuse for that. So he certainly didn't defend the decision. But my question is then, Jimbo, why was it not addressed during? Like, is it something where John at that point is more of an observer? Like, how is it that isn't addressed at the very least at halftime? Like,
right. Well, maybe they did talk about it, and then there was a concession that Gus is going to get more in the second quarter, in the second half, assuming that they have a lead, and then of course going to the fourth quarter, they're back on their heels, and so that plan flips on its head very quickly. But either way. The thing that was so interesting for me, while it's a small comment, any of you know John Harbaugh well, he is not one to quickly throw any player of his or coach of his under the bus, even in the slightest. Even in the most contentious scenarios, contractually, gameplay, off-field issues, he's always very quick to keep things in-house and to be very tight-lipped with the media about his feelings. But this, to me, was so off script for John Harbaugh, even though it was something slight like that, to say simply no excuses for it, right? No. Was a rarity. I mean, to me, my jaw just dropped because I was like, Greg, nail in the coffin. That's it, right?
Jimbo, he had 2 carries on the second drive, right? First quarter, he had 2 carries. We 3 and outed. On the third drive, he had 1 carry. All of this in the first and second, he had 2 carries in the first quarter, 1 in the second, and none in the third or fourth quarter.
Man, yeah.
In a game in which you were leading the majority of it.
Right, and JK was playing well, but this is really where Gus shines, like you said, if you want to avoid those 3 and outs and you want to be in favorable third downs, just like my key to the game was control first and second down, we'll give it to the 4-yard master, right? Like, and I know, sure, he hasn't had his best moments, but certainly we've seen vintage Gus in enough spots this year to know that he could get the job done. But really, I think the discussion is, that quote's important. Is there another one that came to mind for you, Glenn, coming out of that presser where you were like, wow, John Harbaugh might really be fed up with Greg Roman?
Well, I mean, the big thing was the question and how there's no excuse for Gus Edwards.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the big one. It just, as far as that being obvious disappointment with Greg Roman, but then also he talked about how the Steelers kind of flipped the script and did to them what we were supposed to kind of do to them. I mean, he talked about the disappointment and how their run game was, so much more efficient and so much stronger than ours, and how the run defense of the Ravens kind of, played below their par. So,
yeah,
I mean, he definitely wasn't just beating up on Greg Roman. He did credit the work. I mean, the effort level of the team.
Sure.
Said the players played hard. But so it seemed like he was putting the onus. He seemed like he was putting the responsibility of this loss more on the coaches in a lot of ways, which is something that, he usually just kind of skirts around putting responsibility on anyone.
Yeah.
This happened last time.
What happened?
My light went out.
Shoot, yeah.
My light went out. But let me fix that. I'll be right back. Give me one.
But 100%. I mean, I just think it was such an about face to his stance, like Glenn said, customarily, where situations are John doesn't throw people under the bus. But like I said, it's such an about face there when it comes to his defense of or justification for. There was none of it, right? And so to me, that is the ultimate determining factor. I think John is fed up. I think he's done. I think he's over the Greg Roman experiment. And, one of the things that speaks to that really is not only our recent woes, because Lamar's been out, and that's a fair excuse, but if I'm not mistaken, each year from 2019 down, we have gotten worse statistically as an offense.
Yeah, precipitous drop every year.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, if you guys remember, Greg's offense might be this type where maybe it's not a long-term solution. Maybe it's not, because when he was at the Niners, he was out when John was out, or Jim was out, right? I think they only lasted 3 years.
Yeah.
And then, Greg was out the door as well. But that offense, after Colin came in and they kind of hit lightning in a bottle.
It's like it seems like it always is. It's the lightning.
Yeah, it was never really the same, even though they were still good. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Like, just went to NFC Championship games, stuff like that. Just never seemed quite the same. But then, you think about the Bills, even those good years, he got Sammy 1,000-yard season, got Tyrod Taylor a ton of money. I think that was one of probably his best statistical year. Made him a $30 million a year man for a while, which is crazy to think about. But then after that, of course, he's let go. And once again, precipitous drops we see in each one of those organizations. So the Ravens stop is it's the longest leash Greg Roman's been given.
It certainly is, yeah.
Yeah, and this year had to be a bump. I'm not saying it had to be 2019, but it could not have been last year. And it's just a repeat of last year and worse.
And worse is right. I mean, again, start the season riding high and then just a massive nosedive. And look, the criticisms were always there with Greg Roman because of the uniqueness of his offense. But if it stops working, Jimbo, then they only get louder. And then you look at you pull up the snap counts, and then you start using their philosophy as ammunition against themselves. And you start going, well, maybe it's because they play 4 tight ends in a game, 5 if you count Ricard. I mean, maybe it's because their receiving core gets far less snaps than all of their wideout. And I get it. When it works, it's great, and you can kind of use that to defend yourself for being unique. But when you can't score. Look, in the Lamar Jackson era, Jimbo, the Ravens have scored 17 points or fewer 13 times. 6 of those have happened in the last 7 games. It's just been terrible, and it's not like they're going up against juggernaut defenses week in and week out. This is against 17 against Atlanta, 3 points against the Browns, 10 points. I mean, Denver's pretty decent defense, but 13 points against Carolina. I mean, these are not the top echelon defenses in the league, and yet you're putting up, single digit or barely into double digit point totals. it just can't happen in a league where, unfortunately, you're going to have to score points if you're going to keep up with the elite teams in the AFC and, in the NFL in general. But I think patience is wearing ultimately thin. I just don't understand, though, why these things seem to take so long to get corrected. We finally saw the play clock not down to 1 at the snap on this last game. So
only one play, but they were clearly in control. Well, they weren't rushing. It was purposeful.
Right. Exactly. So we got to give them credit there, but it shouldn't take like these week-long adjustment periods to get stuff fixed, like simple stuff like that. Like, I just don't understand how Gus Edwards plays 3 snaps, Jimbo. I don't understand how Andy Isabella and James Prochet outsnap Greg. I mean, I guess he technically outsnapped him. He had 9 snaps, but again, 3 touches.
Yeah. It's just
what are you going to do with 3 touches if you're Gus Edwards?
Especially a guy like Gus, where he's like a locomotive. You know what I'm saying? Like, it takes a minute to wear down on defenses, right? And especially in the second half. So yeah, how much? I don't know I don't think that much of that came from, JK's been kind of making comments about like 15 carries and how can you,
well, I mean, I think the frustration's there for the players.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
It's got to be. I saw Broderick Washington that they were talking about in the locker room. His head's down. He's disappointed. He's shaking his head saying it's just embarrassing. And Calais Campbell, being the leader he is, puts his arm around him and is trying to encourage a young guy, because imagine how hard we take the losses, how tough this must be for these players. And they have to be frustrated when they look over and they see their offense can't score more than 16. It's like their margin for error on this defense is so razor thin because, if you give up 16, 17 points, the chances are their offense can't keep pace. And that's got to be a level of pressure that weighs on a defense, especially if you see a team, like you see an offense convert a 3rd down. Like, dang, man, we got to get off it. Then they convert another 3rd down, and then they get points. And then you see your offense punt, and you're like, man, it's like, geez, it starts to weigh on you. And so even though you might be talented and you might be playing well, even come the 4th quarter, when you keep seeing your offense punting or coming up short, it just weighs on you. And I think that's what's happening to this defense.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's the pressure of it all and the weight of it all. I mean, they're Atlas at this point, right? So yeah, I think it was really interesting and certainly something compelling. We'd like to know your guys' thoughts. Do you think that after that presser, you also ended it saying, John's done with Greg Roman? There's no way in the high heavens that Greg Roman is coming back. And who knows? Maybe John starts, as the end of the season goes, starts putting his fingerprint more and more on the offense. Maybe that leash gets shorter and shorter. He starts butting in those conversations quicker. That'll be really interesting to see. But let us know your guys' thoughts. Do you agree with us that to Glenn and I, that's to me, it's all but over. It's just a man, working his last days, last few weeks.
It's like apologizing for your coworker. Like if your coworker, starts some stuff and then you got to go out and separate the two and calm everything down. I feel like John is just apologizing for his coworker and Greg Roman right now to the media.
Yeah. Well, and he's fed up with doing it.
Yeah, he's tired of having to clean up a mess every time.
Here, you deal with it, dude.
Yeah, you get out there. I'm tired because he's just like, yeah, you're right. Gus should have played more.
Right.
Yep.
What else do you want from me? I mean, it's just I can't sugarcoat this.
It's disappointing. We can't score any points. Like he's just getting up there like, yep, you got it.
He's like, dude, I'm 60 now. I don't have time for these games anymore. Like, yeah. So let us know your guys' thoughts. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Are you excited if this is Greg Roman's last year? And how will it impact the Ravens, the playoffs? Leave all your comments below, and we'll talk to you guys soon.